would seem that this movie is divisive. Yes, as you might recall in my non-spoiler review, this is my spoiler review, you've been warned. But in my non-spoiler review, I was like, I don't see why people are calling this movie divisive. Who couldn't like it? But it turns out, as I said, it is divisive because a number of you are starting to see the movie. It's open to the general public. And some of you do not care for it. And I'll be curious to know after we discuss it, because I'm about to do a deep dive on this mofo, because I think this movie is like, thesis worthy. I think it's that clever. After we discuss it, some of you might be like, oh, I didn't catch those things. And to some degree that, since enough people are saying they don't like it, I guess that would be to some degree, I think it was all there. But I think Jordan Peele, who I talked about in my non-spoiler review of being wonderfully self-aware and situationally aware, I think he'd be like, maybe I didn't spell it out enough. Maybe it was a little bit too intellectual. Sometimes I'll see a movie and I don't catch everything that the movie's trying to say. And you guys will have very spirited discussions about that. But I really sparked to this movie. This movie was right up my alley. And so I'm happy and excited to share my observations with you. And maybe you'll like the movie a little bit more. Maybe you will go see it again after I point some of these things out. But maybe you just will not care for it. That's art. This is art. All right, so to me, in my opinion, an incredibly clever movie. Like, wow, right from the start with that terrifying intro with Gordy and the sitcom massacre. That was just incredible. And to me, a total surprise as to what, to have that element in the film. I was like, what's happening? Is this a soundtrack of a sitcom? As the company intros played, right? And then to just cut to the aftermath of that massacre was terrifying. And it was so chilling. It was more chilling because, again, it's scarier to use your imagination, right? So Jordan Peele didn't show us the entire incident. He just gave us glimpses of it in the aftermath and let us do a lot of the work. And, I really stepped up to the plate. I imagined some gruesome stuff. And I thought that the way that scene would unfold throughout the film as we revisited it was fascinating. At the first, our first image is just seeing that girl's feet and the one shoe on in the background. One shoe is off and it's like oddly standing on edge. I thought the spatter of blood on it. I mean, what a visual. Backstage with all the plants, right? And, moving through that. And then also the empty, abandoned studio audience. I mean, you can just still feel the terror and the energy as everyone ran for their lives. I mean, it was just really chilling and really well done. And while you can totally tell that wasn't a real chimpanzee, it was done with motion capture, and they actually used an actor who has a lot of experience doing motion capture. He was he did a very good job, but you could still tell that was motion capture. But I thought that the uncanny valley of it actually made it even more unsettling. And it reminded me, and I wonder if this was Jordan Peele's inspiration, of one of my favorite classic Edgar Allan Poe stories that's really stuck with me. Maybe you've never heard of the story, so maybe the scene didn't resonate with you. But this reminded me of The Murders in the Rue Morgue, where the murderer is revealed to be an orangutan who tried to pull one of the two women he killed up the chimney. And so that's part of what makes it such an odd murder to solve. Because this woman is jammed up the chimney with strength that you would not be able to attribute to a human being. And that's because the murderer wasn't human. It's a chilling tale. I remember it. I read it, a long time ago, and it stuck with me. But that story is not only scary, but it's a commentary on the danger of wild animals, because the story reveals that the reason there was an orangutan loose in Paris is because the sailor had brought the orangutan back with him after his trip, his travels, because he wanted it as a pet, only quickly found he could not control it. And that's how Gordy fits into the larger narrative. You might be like, why are we doing this? Well, that's because Ricky Park, the star, the child star of that show, didn't learn his lesson, even though he had a front row seat. And when he grew up, he still saw an opportunity in trying to tame another predator, this time from space, so that he could again harness it and make money off of it as a prop in a show. Props and not treating things with respect and like living beings is a big theme here. And I'm going to have a whole section of this later in the video. But first, I'm kind of discussing how the story unfolded and, you know, how it all connected. And so I thought that was just absolutely brilliant. And so I thought it was really, really cool how that scene, you know, at Jupiter's Claim, when Ricky revealed his new show, how that played out. His low rent show in the middle of nowhere, although to him it was everything, right? That was his stage. And you're like, you're not even filling the audience, man, for an alien from space. I mean, I guess, you know, I think he was hoping that future shows would be a sellout. I couldn't believe they were like, no cameras, no cameras. I'm like, people are going to take pictures unless you pay for security, Ricky, to take everyone's cell phone and put in those little pouches that comedians use when you go to see a show. But anyway, all these people, and I felt so bad for them, you know, and it's like, boy, don't stop at roadside attractions. Look at the kind of stuff that goes down. But also the reveal that his Gordy co-star actually survived that attack, but of course was horribly maimed and disfigured. And that, you know, and ended up kind of looking like it was a great misdirect, but it was you didn't feel cheated because there was a payoff as to who that actually was. Like in the trailers, everybody thought maybe that was an alien living amongst us because she kind of had to look like the alien that Ricky and his family had imagined to sell the show, and made you think that there were aliens on that ship, even though it wasn't a ship, it was actually an animal. I mean, that was just really clever, the way that how that all came together. And then when he turned around, when he was introducing the show, on the back of his red suit, I was like, is that the alien in clouds? Does he know about the alien? Is that why he made his suit look like that? And sure enough, he did. That was his new show. And I believe OJ put two and two together a few moments before we did, because he saw the flyer under a bunch of poop fitting. I thought that was a really funny commentary. And he's like, I got to go get my horse. I got to go get Lucky, because he figured out what was happening. But they didn't show us the flyer for long enough for at least for me to make that connection. I wish we could have seen it a little better. So I was like, oh, I get it. But maybe, you know, I have to say the reveal on the back of the jacket, that was pretty special. So I wouldn't have wanted to make the connection any earlier. But anyway, in some ways, maybe this was too subtle for some people. So that's, to me, very interesting. I would be curious, if you didn't like the movie, why not? And tell me if you caught any of these things and you still didn't like it. But anyway, that's why Steven Yeun was buying the horses. They weren't for a show. He was buying them to feed this space predator. That's why he kind of was cagey when, you know, OJ, Daniel Kaluuya's character, was like, I can buy my horses back at some point, right? And Ricky was like, oh, sure. Not, you know, he knew fully well that he'd fed them to a space predator, okay? But then in the amazing scene where he's putting on his new show for the first time, that horse won't get out of the glass box. So, of course, the space predator, I mean, and I say of course, but this was shocking to me. Although in retrospect, Ricky should have known this was going to happen. The predator eats everybody at the show. Everybody, the audience, everyone who works there, Ricky and his whole family, they all get eaten. And that's an amazing scene for the first time. I mean, we were wondering earlier what you were looking at. And it has this cool 2001 Space Odyssey, and you almost feel like you're in like an art installation. But it's the inside of this creature, and you see him eat everybody alive and them get pulled into its digestive system, and they're screaming as they start to be eaten. That was incredible to me. I mean, it was so terrifying, but in a beautiful, you were like, I just can't believe what I'm looking at. It was just, you couldn't look away. I at least couldn't. And, you know, I was scared a lot of this movie and was hiding my eyes, but on that one, I was just locked. I was mesmerized. And you could hear their screams echoing across the valley. You know, when this predator eats its food alive, you can still hear what's happening. Wow. Like, wow. And we're going to talk about its poop in just a moment. All right, so great twist. Not a flying saucer, but a space animal. And not just any animal, but a predator. We always assume these things in the sky are a ship, a vehicle. But what about it being a giant entity, an animal? I thought that was such a great idea, something that I at least have never seen anyone introduce that twist before. So I just was like, wow. And it was terrifying too, because, you know, we always think of the food chain, and that's why people like dinosaurs so much. You know, it's like, oh, humanity is no longer at the top of the food chain. But what if it is an alien, right? Like, and such a big alien in that way. and you just become like food, and you have to try. It was like dinosaurs, like, and fittingly, it's also universal, but like space dinosaurs. It is kind of like space dinosaurs. So I thought that was just fantastic. And I love the evolution of the creature, because he did look like a spaceship. He even had that hole that you would think was for, beaming people up. That was its mouth. And then so first you see its stomach also, and you're not quite sure what that is. And then, the blood rain and the quote unquote excrement, the poop. I mean, that was just an incredible scene when that animal decided to unload on the house. So you see the rain stop over the house because it's hovering right over them. But then there's a blood rain inside the circle, because that animal is discharging all the things that it couldn't digest, the keys, the change. And that, of course, is how OJ and Keke Palmer's, I forgot her character's name, how their father died. It was just collateral damage, because that thing was pooping out with such force these metal objects. So that was just amazing. And then also how the farmhouse looked after that. It was just stained with blood. Oh, I love that. And that farmhouse, I think, intentionally looked a lot like the house from Psycho. And then when it unfurled at the end to be not only terrifying, but beautiful, it looked like something underwater, another world deep underwater that we know almost nothing about, even though it's right on this very planet. Although, of course, in this movie, the space predator was also on this planet. It was in the sky. So I think, interestingly, Jordan Peele's almost saying, like, the sky, I think he is saying, the sky is as unknown to us as the depths of the ocean. And so, and they're both these seemingly dark, endless spaces that you can float through. Why wouldn't there be similarities? Why wouldn't a creature who moves through space be very similar to a creature who moves through the depths of the ocean? It made sense to me. It made sense to me. And it was just, that thing was so weird, but gorgeous. And then how Keke Palmer kills it. Why would it eat that balloon? I guess that was its shark-like qualities, right? It would just eat anything you put in front of it. And then she gets the picture. Although I was like, how's that going to help you? Why wouldn't someone just say that you photoshopped it, right? I don't think today anybody would necessarily believe a still picture. I don't even know if anybody would believe a video. I think you would only believe it if you saw it with your own eyes. So I was like, why didn't they call the police or the army? I mean, part of me can understand why, like, would the army do anything about it? Would they try and also harness this horrible creature for their own good? Of course, I think it would complicate the story, but I wish there had been, they wanted to make money off of it, so that's why they didn't call anybody. But I don't know. I don't know if they would make money off of it, even the way things went down. But at least they survived, so they got that going for them. And then, of course, Spielberg. This is where Spielberg comes in, because, he made two very, movies that I think you could maybe describe this as a mashup of, Jaws and Close Encounters. And then, of course, both did involve the government and law enforcement, right? Jaws was like the main character, Brody, Chief Brody. But, space and hunting like an animal that was hunting people, right? But I gotta say, I still don't think Spielberg is a good comparison to this movie, because this movie doesn't have Spielbergian visuals. It has Nolan visuals because it has Nolan's DP. But even more than that, from a directing standpoint, Spielberg is extremely talented as a director, but he has his things fit together almost like Legos. Like, he's an artist with Legos. Things like snap together, and he creates like almost mathematical formulas. I think that's kind of the way Spielberg puts his movies together. But Peele here, I think, is more an artist with a paintbrush. I think there's more of a fluidity and an artistic sensibility to it. As I said before, an intellectualism in my non-spoiler review, which is why I said Hitchcock. Hitchcock's like between Tarantino and Kubrick and Spielberg. And I think that Peele is a little bit more in the Kubrick-Tarantino camp. But the reason I had even brought Hitchcock in, besides the Psycho House reference, was because I thought there was a glamour to this film that Hitchcock's movies are so famous for, and that hardly anybody else in Hollywood does. Hitchcock's famous for that cinema is not a slice of life, but a slice of cake. And I felt that in some ways, this was like hyper-realized kind of situation like that, with some of the color choices that were made, and some of the visuals, and just the way it was put together. So that's why I put Hitchcock in the mix here. But also, speaking of animals, I love that the cinematographer character in this movie, his specialty, his passion, he says that famous Hollywood saying, do one for them, then one for you, right? because he's like, maybe I could work for, for free or for, for a cut on the back end because I did that commercial, which obviously was one for them. If you don't know that saying, it's a famous saying in Hollywood where a lot of people say, you do the big blockbuster so that you can make the smaller movie and still keep your career alive. So that's the one for them, one for me mentality. A lot of people do that. But anyway, this guy's specialty and passion was nature photography, animals. And I loved, by the way, when Keke Palmer said, didn't I say this mofo was going to show up with a camera that didn't need electricity? Oh, I thought that was so great. It was such a great line. But the one thing that didn't work with me with the cinematographer was his moment of, what did work? The Purple People Eater song. Oh my God, that was brilliant when you realized what he was like kind of doing a spoken word of. And you were like, not only is that hilarious, but that really fits this what's happening. There are similarities, and almost like that hole in the bottom of the space predator is almost like the one eye. And I was like, did that song also inspire Jordan Peele to make this movie? And I thought it was great. But the one thing with the cinematographer to me that didn't work was his self-sacrifice at the end, where he's like, no one deserves to get the perfect shot. But I was like, but what did he die for? Did he die to get the perfect shot? Like the perfect shot lives on, so it's okay if he doesn't? But he got swallowed up with his camera. Did that space predator poop out the camera? That would have been a great end credit scene. There wasn't one. But if you'd seen the camera get pooped out, because the stuff got pooped out, like, not at all touched. I mean, it seemed perfectly fine. It wasn't damaged at all by the digestive tract of that space predator. So I didn't understand why he did that and what the point of that was. Although I loved when Angel wrapped himself in barbed wire. Very, very smart. We'll get to Angel a little bit later in this spoiler review. But speaking of getting the shot, I thought the TMZ stuff was hilarious. I thought that was so great. And I loved that otherworldly kind of helmet that he had, as the motorcyclist had. But that, of course, echoed that the back of the flash, the camera flash, or whatever that tool was they were using at the commercial that made the horse feel like it was something was looking at it in the eye. And that, of course, really put that paparazzo, on the shit list of that space predator. But so that was great. That was really great. And I love that he stayed faceless the whole time. OJ tried to save him, but I like when OJ. Okay, I'll say it here. I was going to say it a little bit later, but they had this commentary, I think, that in most horror movies, the white characters are always doing really stupid things. And there's been this long-running joke in the black community, I believe, that, black characters would never do that because it's so stupid. Why would you do that? So here, OJ was like, I was trying to save you, man, but it looks like it's just not going to work out. So, he tried. So he backs off there. And then also when he was in his car and he peeks out and he sees that the creature's right above him and he's like, nope. Then he goes back in the car. He's like, not dealing with that. And he locks the door and just sleeps in the car. I thought that stuff was fantastic. It was great. And then Keke Palmer picks up the bike later and she's riding it to safety. And I just thought that was a very cool shot as well. I was impressed she could ride a bike right away. Is that just something you could, if you can ride a bicycle, can you ride a motorcycle? I would be concerned, that would be a hard thing to just pick up, literally. Other great moments in the movie, the aliens in the barn. I was sold. I mean, it turns out to be just the kids, but I was actually like, oh shit, when that happened in the movie, because it was right there. You were like, oh my God. Because usually in these types of movies, it's just a tease, right? They're like, did you see an alien? You'll never know. It's up to you to decide. But I was like, oh no. That alien's standing right there. It's standing up. It's coming right toward me. Oh my God, there's another one in the barn. How many are in here? And then Daniel Kaluuya said, nope. And he just runs out. In these other horror movies, a white character would be like, let me go talk to it. Or let me tell it, not today, aliens. And I like Daniel Kaluuya was like, I'm not going to do this. And he punched one in. Did he punch one in? I think he wanted to punch one in the face. Did he punch a kid in the face? I loved it though. That whole sequence was fantastic. And I also liked when Daniel Kaluuya was on horseback with the cowboy music swelling, he just was such a cool hero moment. I loved it. And I really loved the way the movie would circle back to things. That's not only great, callbacks. That's not only great screenwriting, but it's also a primary rule of comedy writing and sketch improv, which of course is Jordan Peele's background. So I thought it was used very well here, not only with comedy, but with a lot of the dramatic elements as well. Like the well photo op. You establish the well at the beginning of the movie with Keke Palmer photobombing it and then her using it to get that shot of the alien. Now, naming the space predator Jean Jacket, that was great because, they were really highlighting that it was like dealing with a horse. You can't control it. You have to, as OJ says, you have to respect it. You have to make a deal with it. That's why someone like OJ was such a perfect person to figure this, he was the best person to deal with this space predator because he had his whole life dealing with animals, respecting them and making a deal with them because horses are very dangerous. And that's why the commercial scene was so important. It, again, just like the Gordy scene, established how Hollywood deals with these animals. Like, they want them to just be props. Like, who would stand at the back end of a horse? I mean, I couldn't believe that the people who worked there were like, oh, I'm just going to stand here. I mean, I would think that everybody would know not to stand near the back of a horse. I'm like, if that horse gets spooked, you're going to get kicked. Like, wow. But then, as they fired OJ because, things did not go well and someone almost did get kicked, in the background, you see them bringing in the green screen horse because, they're like, that's just better. Because when Gordy was around, they didn't have those capabilities when they did the Gordy show. But today, they just want to CGI. I think, and we'll talk about how they treat people in just a moment, but I think they'd love to CGI eventually everybody in. Things are becoming more and more animated. Because, they don't treat people like they're real. And I think that was also a commentary. Like, that's how they treat animals that way, but this is also how people are treated in Hollywood, right? Like the story even about how the Scorpion King, like their dad torpedoed his whole relationship with his daughter for the Scorpion King movie, which was OJ's first gig, but then they didn't even use horses. They wasted their time, And they had a callback to the Scorpion King with that hooded sweatshirt, which I thought was fantastic. But that was very important commentary, I thought. And then also even how fans deal with things, right? Like fans don't treat things like they're real people. Like they also just treat them like props, right? Like the whole commentary of what Jupiter's claim was, including the Gordy special secret room, right? And those tourists who paid all that money to spend a night in there because they found it titillating, even though of course it represented a horrific situation for everybody who was involved. And, and even the cruelty of what was done to Gordy. Gordy attacked those actors, but Gordy, was not being handled correctly because it was a wild animal. And also even maybe Keke Palmer's feelings as a child with having Jean Jacket taken away because the job was more important than that man's relationship with his daughter. That's just really, really interesting that living things are treated as if they're not alive, that everything's a prop, which of course is a Hollywood term. So I just thought that was so well done. So remember, the whole thing is important, from the Gordy stuff to that commercial shoot to Jupiter's claim and the show that he wanted to put on. It's all connected. So that's great. Now, the movie mostly takes place in the same valley because of COVID shooting, so that was very clever. So you have the Haywood Stables, or their farm, basically. You have Jupiter's Claim. But Jordan Peele very cleverly managed to break it up with a few scenes to make it feel like it wasn't restricted, even though, of course, it was due to COVID. So you had that quick hospital scene with his dad, although you'll notice you never see anybody else, so they didn't have to shoot with anyone else. The commercial shoot, which I thought was great. The DP's home editing bay, which, again, it was just him, but it still gave you a different location to expand the world of the movie. And then, of course, the Best Buy type store where Angel works. Oh, that was so well used. Great way to open up the movie and to add a lot of humor. Talking to him at the store when they check out, and he's like, yeah, sure, set this all up yourself. And they're like, okay, Angel. And then that he was still monitoring their feed from the store after hours. And as soon as he said, you don't want me monitoring the feed for you? And they said no. In my head, I was like, change the password. He's gonna loop in from outside. And sure enough, he did. So that happened. Then when they were escaping, they went to his apartment, remember, later in the third act? And I loved it. Speaking of escaping, they went even further to escape with both Keke Palmer and Angel doing virtual reality, right? That was their escape, to just leave the world behind. And Angel was doubling down by also smoking a joint. And I just thought that was brilliant. But yet in the middle of them, OJ refused to leave reality. He was going to figure this out. So I thought that was really good. And again, it's like reality and treating things like they're actually happening, or so I guess it's not just props, but with that commentary, just escaping and detaching yourself from stuff emotionally so it doesn't affect you. I mean, it's just really, I think, really, really well done. Then I loved when they went to get food. I mean, I will agree, a fried fish sandwich really hits the spot and cheers you up. I thought that was great. Really, really funny stuff. And then at the end, I was so glad that OJ made it. So glad that he made it. I mean, I loved his bond with his sister, and I loved that they got to continue together. Like from childhood, that flashback where he does like the thing when, you know, she got left behind. I mean, it's like they know that they're in it together no matter what, even when their things are bad, even though they're so different personally, and even when things are not going well for either of them or for them together, they still are locked onto each other for survival. And that was, I just think, such a great thing about a human bond. I loved it. So I thought that was great. And then finally, the IMAX visuals. I thought those were so good. Not only like the wide expanse on the ground, but in the sky. I mean, they really made you feel like you were looking up at the sky with IMAX. I thought that was so well done. And like the clouds, Jordan Peele said he wanted to make a movie about clouds because clouds are just so incredible that they exist. And I have to say, I've had those thoughts myself. I often will look up at the sky and not only marvel at how cool clouds are, but how they differ depending on where you are. Like they are different in different parts of the globe, just like foliage is. Like it really makes you realize just how big the earth is. There's so many different places that there's so much variety. There's so many different kind of landscapes on earth. That's how big it is. And so if that's just earth, imagine what space is like. It's crazy. So I just thought that was great. I thought that was just really, really great. And that one cloud that didn't move, right? That was just really clever. I mean, and they had to do it with the fast forwarding with Angel, but that DP, he spotted it just by watching the sky, because of course that's what he does. I thought that was great. And to see that thing at the beginning, flying through the clouds and kind of hiding, you know, actually now that I think about it, at first it seemed like it was just the ship flying in and out of the clouds, but actually it was like an underwater creature hiding in kind of like the coral, but the coral was clouds. That's so cool, and had like a camouflage ability. I thought that was great. Just like underwater creatures, deep underwater creatures. Loved it. So that's my spoiler review for Nope. I'll be very curious to hear your own observations and what you think after we've discussed it. Did I change your mind at all? Share all those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.